The purpose of going through this is so that everyone understands what crafting options exist in the game. There's not many, but there are some, and you can use them to your advantage to try and make really good items. I will put a disclaimer that most of it is sort of gambling. It's not really comparative to PoE 1 if you're familiar with that system or the systems that exist there, where you can sort of really force the outcome of specific things to happen on items. In PoE 2, it's kind of bare bones. We have a couple of things that we can do to craft items from, normal or magic to rare. And that's the plan. We're trying to go through them and explain them for you. So the first thing that's really important is that everyone understands how items exist within PoE. PoE 1, PoE 2, it's the same thing. There are several different base types for a given item base. So for instance, we can go with gloves. For gloves, there's a ton of different gloves that exist, and they have level requirements to equip them, and they also have different base types, if you will. So there's armor, evasion, and energy shield. That's present on gloves, helmets, chests, boots. So the level requirement to put certain gloves on, for instance, will increase, and the base of that item will also increase in terms of its potency. So if we're looking at energy shield specifically, in PoE 2, there are the top tier bases, which are called expert, and those are the highest level bracket required to equip. And within the expert category, if you're looking specifically at energy shield types, you'll see that the energy shield as a base goes up along with the level requirement to equip them. So for energy shield specifically, the expert intricate gloves have the highest local energy shield on the item. It requires 75 to wear, level 75, and requires 122 int. So this can be applied to armor and evasion base types as well as hybrid base types. So you'll see armor and evasion. It's the same way. It works the same in PoE 1, PoE 2, except in PoE 1 you have ranges on the base that you can roll between. In PoE 2, it's just a flat amount that you can't really change. So that's the first really important thing, is that understanding that different base types are more valuable purely because the local defense you're getting from them is higher. So oftentimes when you're looking to craft an item, you want to craft on the best base because it's, one, inherently more valuable to people purchasing the item. They're not going to purchase an item on a really shitty base if they can get the same item on a better base, because it just means they're losing energy shield or evasion or armor. So crafting on the best bases is always optimal for that reason specifically. The second part of that equation is the level requirement. Now, this is when modifiers come into place. Using PoEDB, we can see all of the modifiers that are present on any item, or mostly any item. So if we are to go to the modifiers tab and go to gloves again, using energy shield as a base, int requirement, you'll see these are all the mods that can roll on int required base types. And this is true for any intelligence base type. This doesn't matter. This is not taking into account base type or whatever. Like, this is if you want int gloves that use energy shield, these are the mods that can roll on them. The second part of it is that there are level requirements to roll specific modifiers. So if the level requirement for max roll mana is 77, this mod cannot roll on items that have a level 60 requirement on them. It just will never show up because the item level of the item is too low to ever have this mod. So that's the second part, is you want to try and craft on the highest level requirements so that you can get every single modifier that's available to roll. So that's why the level of modifiers matters and the item base matters. So again, to recap, you want to use the best base type for the archetype you're using, whether that's armor, evasion, or energy shield, and you want to use the highest level item you can so that all of the mods can roll. That's the first part. So we'll go through the couple of crafting options we have in PoE 2. You have transmutes and augs. These don't deterministically determine any mod to roll. It's just a way of making a normal item into a magic item and rolling one modifier on it. So you can take a normal item, you can apply a transmute to it, and it'll make it magic with any mod. It's completely random. And then you can add a second modifier with an augmentation. So what's to note here is that if you transmute an item and you add a prefix to it, the aug will always add a suffix. You can only have one prefix and one suffix on a magic item. You can never have two prefixes. So the way that you would do it is you have a normal item, you transmute it, it adds a prefix or a suffix, you aug it to add the additional mod that's missing, either a prefix or suffix, and then you would use a regal to turn that item into a rare item. These are completely random. You are going to get random mods. There's no weight here that tells you it's going to roll into something else. This is just the bare bones crafting options that's always existed in PoE, and that's pretty much where it stops. If you want to add more modifiers to the item, you can use Exalted Orbs. This will add up to 3 more modifiers after you've gone through this process, and those are again completely random. You can use Exalted Orbs on rare items to add up to 6 mods. You will only ever have 3 prefixes and 3 suffix mods on an item, as you can see here. You have prefix, you have mana, flat ES, percent ES, and then you have suffixes, which are resists and int. You can only have 3 of each. So that's the basics of crafting in PoE. Getting into how crafting is sort of like in PoE 2, we can go into essences. So essences exist in PoE 1 as well. They're a little bit different. In PoE 1, they add specific modifiers. So you can add lightning damage to a wand in PoE 1. In PoE 2, they have a tag. And if you're familiar with Harvest in PoE 1, it's very similar. So take the Essence of Mind, for instance. This will upgrade a normal item to a magic with 1 mana modifier. And this is where that website comes into play. So if we are to use this essence on an item, we are going to get a mana modifier, meaning that any modifier that's present on that item that can roll with the mana tag will always roll. If it's 1 mana modifier, like this, on gloves, you will only ever roll mana. The tier is completely random, but you will only ever hit mana. If you have an item like a ring that has multiple mana modifiers, you will roll 1 of them. It's not deterministic in that way. You can't guarantee to roll flat mana. You will either roll mana, or you'll roll mana regen, or you'll roll mana per enemy killed, or you'll roll mana regen and light radius. The weightings of how, like what rolls when, I'm not too sure are discovered yet. There is a site called Craft of Exile where you can see, I think they're suggested weightings. I'm not sure if they're real or how accurate they are, but if you were to type in here Breach Ring, and you were to go to Regal and do a mana, if you wanted to check yourself to see how often you would hit flat mana, let's say max tier, it says on average you would need 27, it calls them Regals, but it's not a Regal. You would need 27 of these on average to hit T1 mana. I'm not sure if the weightings are accurate, but this is another tool you can use to determine how often you would hit this. So yeah, that's as far as normal essences go. You then have greater essences. Now, greater essences take it one step further. It takes a magic item and turns it into a rare item using the same mechanic. For instance, with this one, it turns a magic into a rare with 1 defense modifier. So on gloves, if we go back to gloves, you can check the tags to see int. You can check the tags to see which ones have defense. So you have energy shield, flat, percent, and you have hybrid. These are the only mods on gloves that have defense. So when you use this essence on a magic item, you will always get one of those mods. And that can be useful for you if you combine it with what we just learned about normal items with magic items, is that you can have a magic item with 2 really good mods on them, and you can force a specific outcome with a greater essence. So I've prepared a couple of things here to show you what that would look like, and we can go through it together. So we have here a focus. It's okay, it's mid, with lightning damage and +2. On a focus in the meta right now, you'd want something mana related on this, whether that's mana regen or mana. So we've purchased a greater essence of the mind to try and get mana or mana regen on a focus. And if we go to our trusty PoEDB and we go to offhands and foci, if we look at the mana tags, we will see we can roll mana as flat, we can roll hybrid energy shield and mana, and we can roll mana regen. So there's a large pool of things we can roll here. Ideally, we'd want flat or mana regen, but this is the best sort of way we can try and get mana onto the item without gambling. So if we hit this with an essence, we got tier 2 flat mana, which is shit. It's quite bad. That's the second lowest tier. And from this point forward, there's nothing left to do on the item except use exalts and try and get mods we want. We slammed for crit chance for spells and chaos res. Quite bad. We don't really want to use this. It's trash. Which is why I've prepared a second one, because they're plentiful in the market. So we have mana this time and spell skills, because we just learned slamming mana there's a lot of mods. Maybe it's not the best idea. Maybe we try to slam something else. So we've decided to purchase a sorcery essence. This turns a rare item, a magic item, to a rare item with 1 caster modifier. So if we look at the tags, we'll see, oh, there's one mod that has caster here, cast speed, and then there's plus level of skills, there's crit chance, there's crit spell bonus. Wait, we made a massive mistake. There's so many things here that have caster on them. So maybe using a caster essence isn't too smart. So we look back and we say, okay, well, what do we want on the item that doesn't have too many things on it? Cast speed's really good. We want cast speed, and it has the speed tag. Okay, that's the only mod that has a speed tag. So why don't we go and purchase a speed essence instead, so that we can guarantee that mod. So we'll do Greater Essence of Haste, Exalted Orbs. It's fucking expensive, but we want it. We want to make a good focus. So now we're going to say, okay, well, we want to guarantee cast speed. It's the only speed modifier. We're going to make it have cast speed. So we hit tier 1, lowest tier of cast speed. Quite bad. We would have hoped for better, but now we can Exalt Slam the item. We got Flat ES, Lightning Res, Fire Damage. Not too bad, honestly. That's maybe it's worth something to someone. It's not terrible. So we're happy with that. We don't mind. Maybe we can sell that for profit or something. It's not terrible. Yeah, and that's sort of how Greater Essences work. If you want to use this to your advantage, you can find items that you purchase with good mods on them already. So right now for Spark, mana and mana regen, really, really good. We love both of those stats, and we for sure want cast speed on it, right? So you can go into the mods and you can look at rings, and you find that cast speed is the only thing that caster can roll on rings. So you're guaranteed to get cast speed. So you can sort of buy items like this for maybe a divine, 2 divines, 3 divines, depending on the rolls, and you can guarantee cast speed on them like this. And then now all of a sudden you have a really good ring with 3 mods. And you can luck, slam the rest of your mods on there, and hope that you get a really good ring. If you don't get something you want, you can try to sell it. If you get something favorable, you can use it. But this is a really good way of trying to craft yourself good items, is by buying items with 2 good mods on them, and then trying to force a 3rd mod on them with the Greater Essence, so that you can guarantee yourself a good outcome like this. If you do this enough times, I promise you, you will make good rings. I've made all of my rings this way. It just takes a little bit of luck. So as our last little example here, we have an amulet, which is a different base type we haven't seen yet. We can go to the modifier list here and go to amulets and pull them up. So for Spark, for my build specifically, you really want Spirit, and you really want percent mana, and you want flat mana. These are really, really good to have. But of course, on Nex, you also have mana regen and mana recoup, which is kind of shit. So for this is sort of like a little gamble. You really want to hit these 2 mods. So we hit flat mana, which is great. We hit a high tier, tier 9, which is nice. Somewhere in this range here. Really good. And again, all we have to do left is slam the item. Spell damage, fire damage, lightning resistance. So this is not terrible. It's not great. But if we really wanted to make the item good, this is where the next crafting step comes in, and that's Omens. So Omens exist in this game, very dissimilar to PoE 1, where Omens will force an outcome to happen on your items. So the biggest Omens right now to use for crafting are the Omens of Whittling. These ones will Chaos Orb the lowest level modifier on the item. So what that means is that if we go back to these mods and we check the mana, for instance, you'll see all these numbers here. These are the levels required to roll mana on the item. And what this Omen does is it says, okay, well, on the item you have 6 mods, ideally. I'm going to remove the lowest one and replace it with a random mod. So what we can do is take this item, we can pin it using Alt, and we can open up our trusty notepad, and we can open up this, and we can look at the item and say, okay, well, what are the levels of modifiers on my item, right? We go through it one by one. We say, okay, well, the first mod is Spirit. That's tier 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's level 41. That requires 41 to roll in the item. We then go down to mana. We say, okay, tier 9 mana. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 53. That requires 53 to roll. We go to spell damage, T5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 62. We go to suffixes, +2 spell skills. That would be in here. That requires level 41. 41. T6 fire res. 6 fire res here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 60. And finally, we have lightning resistance, which is tier 1. So that's level 1. So this is pretty clear cut. Now we have all of our level requirements listed out. And we say, okay, well, we don't really need T1 lightning resistance. It's kind of bad. And the Omen says it'll remove the lowest level modifier. So if you look at all these, the lowest level is this one here. It's going to remove lightning resistance and it's going to replace it with something random because that's what a Chaos Orb does. It removes one modifier and replaces it with a random modifier. So if we take this neck and we use an Omen on it, it's guaranteed to remove that lightning res because we've already determined that that is the lowest level modifier. So it's going to remove lightning res and it gave us cast speed. Wow, cast speed's really good. We want that. We love cast speed for our build. So now we can go back and we can say, okay, we got 12% cast speed. That's also level 1. So it didn't do anything. It just stayed level 1. So if we wanted to keep crafting this item, we could use these whittlings and we could keep rolling off the modifiers that we don't want, provided that they're the lowest level. If, in this case, we want cast speed, we don't want to roll it off, we want to try and craft the item further, there are other omens you can use, which are very expensive, and I don't recommend doing unless your item is very good, called the Dextral Erasure and Sinistral Erasure. So what these will do will lock it so that your Chaos Orb only affects prefix modifiers. And you can use that in conjunction with a whittling to only roll off the modifiers in either category. So if you take the item and separate it here in 2, you would say these are the prefixes, right? Because these are the top 3 mods. And these are the suffixes down here. When you look at this, now all of a sudden you have a different lowest level of modifier. This is the lowest in prefixes. And this is still the lowest in suffixes. So let's say you didn't want Spirit on the item for whatever reason. You could roll off the Spirit in the prefix category because it's the lowest level, using a whittling and using a Sinistral Erasure. And you just right click both of them and it'll apply it to the same Chaos Orb. So that's another advanced way of crafting items further. But again, I'm warning you, they are very expensive. This is 11 divines. And the other one is 17 divines. So unless your item is almost perfect, I would almost never recommend using these. Or you're just trying to craft a really fucking good item. That's pretty much the extent of how you can craft items in the game. There's Chaos Orbs as well that can add an additional modifier or up tier the range of a mod, but that's sort of advanced stuff, and I don't recommend doing that for most people. So try to stick to these. You can make some really good items with greater essences. Just keep in mind, you want to try to find magic items with really good mods on them to try and greater essence a third mod onto it, and then you can slam them with exalts. And then you can use those omens to try and force a better outcome than you received. So if you get a really shit res like we did, you can use an omen and you can try and get something better. But yeah, I hope that helped. And yeah, GG's. Sorry, one more thing. I forgot something. Divine Orbs, that's part of crafting. So a Divine Orb randomizes the numeric values of modifiers on an item. What does that mean? If you press Alt on the item, it'll show you the number ranges of the mods that are on the item. So you'll see we have 44 Spirit right now, but the roll range is 43 to 46. So what a Divine Orb does is it re-rolls the number in that range. So if we wanted a different amount of mana, for instance, we take our mana for as an example, we want to get as much mana as possible, right? We want to try and get as close to 124. You could use a Divine Orb and you can roll it, and the mana and every other mod on the item will change. So you can try and divine items to be better if you're really happy with the item. You like items like this, right? Where you want to get as much energy shield, as much mana, as much res as possible. these are the kind of items that you're happy with, where you'd want to use divine orbs to try and maximize the value of that item in terms of what it gives you and of course what it's worth. Divining items is a very end stage process where you would only do that if you have a lot of money and you want to basically extract as much potency from the item as possible. I don't recommend doing that for the general crafting experience, but if you find an item and you really want it to be as best as possible, divining it is also an option.